Before we get into today's interview, I want to remind you all to be sure to support our partners in safety. They help make this podcast possible. First and foremost, we have Mighty Line Floor Tape. They were partners in safety from way back, the original partners in safety. They've supported this podcast for a very long time. Look, if you're struggling in your facilities with markings, layout, 5S, Mighty Line has you covered. They have all those floor marking materials from signs to tape. They've got tape designed to withstand forklift traffic, textured tape for grip, for slips, trips, falls, all of that good stuff. You can even have custom signs made with your high-resolution logos and images. So go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Let them know that we sent you, and you can get a free sample of their incredible floor tape. That's mightylinetape.com/podcast. Also, we want to thank Aero Safety. Drew Hinton over at Aero Safety has been a huge fan of the podcast for many years and is now a friend and not just a colleague. We have gotten together many times on the podcast and talked about topics that are important to all safety professionals. And we love the support that Aero Safety has shown the podcast. If you have safety training needs, you have safety program development needs, if you want audits, inspections of your facilities, you want something that's customized for your business, not just some off-the-shelf generic audit, inspection, or training program, then Aero Safety has you covered. Go to aerosafetyus.com and make sure you submit your quote request to them. Again, go to aerosafetyus.com and get a custom quote today.
Welcome back to the SafetyPro podcast. I'm here once again with our good friend, Drew Hinton from Aero Safety, aerosafetyus.com. Drew, how are you doing?
Doing good. How you doing, Blaine?
Never better. Well, I don't know what I'm going to say, because I've been better.
Typical trade answer, living the dream.
Yeah, I know. So, man, we were talking just offline about, and this is usually how it goes with me. What are we going to talk about? The training. You're obviously, you do a lot of training with Aero Safety, and safety professionals do a lot of training, within our organizations. But I am surprised at how often we miss little requirements or little sections of training requirements that are easily overlooked, and I can't explain how, but it happens. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about funny little things that are commonly missed when it comes to safety training. And I would like to bring up the first one out of the gate. We'll talk about the competent person. It's the easiest one, in my opinion, to talk about, and then we'll get into some of the others. What is it about the competent person training that companies miss?
So, depending on what topic you're looking at, the competent person could be something in the realm of fall protection. In years past, you may have a competent person in electrical safety. There's a competent person over in the construction side of confined space as well. But a lot of companies miss
excavations, Part P, yeah,
absolutely. And so a lot of companies, they'll cover one part of it, which is usually they've have the training and education to, if they see something, they can identify those issues. But the other component that ties into that is, have they been given the authority from the company to take prompt corrective actions? And then with that, does everybody know that they've been given that authority? Does the person even know that they've been given the authority? Right? So, and we always explain it. We whether we teach a fall protection competent person class or whatever it may be, especially as a third party, we come in. It's like a disclaimer slide. The very first part of the training is, we're giving you qualifications to serve in this role. I can't be the one that says you are a competent person on behalf of your company, your employer has to make that designation. But yeah, or they may informally be made aware of, okay, you're a competent person for our company now, but nobody else knows that at the site. So it draws a lot of confusion.
And it stems, and I love that you do that, because not a lot of companies will do that. Like consultants or training companies, they'll advertise competent person training. And I'm like, well, if you look at the definition of competent person, I don't know. And I know what they're doing with the marketing thing, and I don't want to split hairs.
Yeah.
But it can lend itself to the company that's maybe a small company. They do hire out a lot of safety services, rightfully so. They want to be responsible, so they work with local consultants or safety services providers to ensure that they've got the things they need for their workers. And so they'll see competent person training, and they're like, well, OSHA says I need a competent person on this project to oversee fall protection or something. And they see this, and then they go, you're a competent person. And they send like their laborers to go through the training, and nobody's listening to these folks. They're not stopping the job and to make changes and things. They don't have that authority. And you're right. So this this stems from the definition of a competent person. So you're not going to find this in the training requirements. You're going to see the standard reference the need for a competent person to be involved in any given topic. Fall protection, for example, subpart P, excavations. Excavation shall be inspected by a competent person at the beginning, before work begins, and throughout the shift, after a significant event like rain or something like that. So they have these little things, but they reference a competent person. You have to go and look up the definition. How does OSHA define a competent person? And it's two things: training. Right? Knowledge. I shouldn't say training.
Right.
Knowledge, right? To recognize and understand the requirements of that thing that they're talking about. Excavations, fall protection, confined space. And authority to stop the job when they do recognize those deficiencies, those things, and make changes or affect changes or get the resources they need. So,
right.
I love that one, and I do see that being missed sometimes by some companies. Right? Have you ever had anybody question you, like on that slide, that disclaimer slide, and go, "Hey," maybe a participant, they raise their hand and go, "My company won't I don't have authority. Like, how do I deal with this?"
Yeah, or sometimes we'll just ask the generic questions, like, "Okay, who's been through a competent person training course, whatever, or been deemed a competent person by their employer?" And you'll get a few in each class that'll raise their hand. And said, "What changed? After you did that, what changed? Did they walk through different responsibilities with you? What changed other than you went to a class or you just had this magical title?" Right? And so, like you mentioned, it's the definition being twofold. One being they can identify hazards. The other part being kind of split into two is it can stop the job, which realistically everybody should have, the authority to realistically stop a job that's unsafe. But the taking prompt corrective actions. And for example, when you look at the fall protection standards, like when we teach a fall protection competent person class or train the trainer, whatever it may be, we always point out differences. For example, hey, we'll have a whole section on here's differences in how OSHA words this versus how ANSI, for example, ANSI is the Z359 standard words it. And that's one of the differences on there. And it's a very simple, subtle change, but in my opinion, it's a big change. Is OSHA will say for a comp person, have training, education, kind of, I call it book smarts, or have experience, all that stuff. So kind of street smarts. Whereas if you look at ANSI, it says and. It says we want you to have both, not just training. I said, if you want to comply, you could just go sit through a class and comply, and your employer deems you that competent person and not really have a whole lot of experience out in the field, or vice versa. You could go out and get a lot of experience and not really have a whole lot of formalized training and education on what that means, and your employee can deem you a competent person, like I said, and comply with OSHA. But if you look at ANSI, which is, people know that that's kind of the gold standard for fall protection, it says both. We want you to have street smarts and book smarts. Because I always give them an example. I said there's people out there with PhDs that are complete idiots out in the field, and vice versa. There are people out there that have been doing it for 20 years, but they've been doing it the wrong way, right? So, and it's I'll explain to them. It's you got the authority to take prompt corrective actions within a reason. Sure, your company doesn't want you going out and spending $10,000 without running up chain of command. But if I see the company I used to work at, they would kind of routinely, I call them the horizontal lifelines in a bucket. Go buy a 5-gallon bucket, and it had a horizontal lifeline, 2 cross-arm straps, and tensioners, all that stuff.
It's a kit, right? They used to package this kit.
Right, buy it, Granger, Fastenal, all these major companies, and so they would do that because they would travel, for field service jobs. And I said, if you're out there, you see like maybe the sag on that horizontal lifeline's too much. I said it may be a simple fix is, hey, let's go make another wrap around with that cross-arm strap and tighten that up. I said, that's a simple fix. You don't have to call your boss about that. They are giving you the authority to say, you see the issue, you know how to fix it, take care of it. Or if you don't know how to take care of it, call the appropriate people to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And another example of this, kind of switching gears a little bit. Oh, by the way, before we switch gears, you reminded me of a story. I was talking to a compliance officer, and so I used to teach at the OSHA Ed Center, right? I chaired the outreach training program, and we would get compliance officers that would have to come in, and they would have to get do their renewal training refreshers. And so it's hilarious. I would be conducting the class, and there would be compliance officers in attendance. And we were covering excavations, and it was around this topic. And he said the same thing you just said, similar. He said that, I don't want to talk, when I show up on an excavation site, I don't want to talk to the safety manager that has a PhD in geology, right? I want to talk to the pipe layer that's in the ditch. And I want to know, do they know what to look for? Do they understand the requirements? And I thought that's an important distinction that, and I don't know that you can enforce that outside of the minimum. Did you cover the hazards of the work that they're doing in general terms as part of your just training, safety training for your workers, right?
Yeah.
But it's an important distinction, and I've kind of always talked to safety professionals about this. It's not enough that I know all the things that need to go into place for lockout, tagout. My job is to make sure that the maintenance workers know all the things that go into lockout, tagout, because they're the ones doing it, not me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that does change that. It flips that mindset of keeper of knowledge to a dissemination of knowledge. To my job isn't to know this stuff. My job is to make sure others know this stuff. And that is a big difference, right?
Yeah.
Big difference.
We are. Yeah, we actually.
A bottleneck. They have to come to you for all the answers.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah, it makes me think of, we've got a customer, they're getting ready to go into one. I don't know if you've dealt with it in the past. So, like, for example, ISNet World, they've got I think it's called Ravs 360. The customer that you're working for, they'll usually choose X amount or all of their contractors doing work at their site to do they'll interview them. And so it's a like you mentioned, it's a two-sided interview. So, for example, the management will get interviewed on what policies do you have in place, and then they'll interview, I think, maybe 10 people, boots on the ground folks, and say, hey, walk us through what are the 7 steps to lock out, tag out, to see if they actually know it and they're not having to go to the safety manager or all that stuff. And so it's I mean, as much as an administrative headache it is for our customers sometimes to get all that stuff squared away, I was like, this is a good thing to see. Are your employees actually remembering this stuff even in your training, or you don't just have a policy that nobody knows about?
Yeah. I used to do the VPP gap assessment, right? And so for our clients, they want to partner with OSHA, and so we would go, okay, we'll see how far off you are you know, with the standard. And of course, one of the elements of the VPP was safety training. Then we would do that. We would go right to the workers. It's about training effectiveness. You could show me your training book and your PowerPoint slides and records where somebody sat in a chair or was present when you were talking about this. It's how effective was it? And that is only measured by whether they've retained it, understand it, and more importantly, you could see them acting on it.
Yeah.
You can see it in the work. And I always use the example of HAZCOM. This is another good example of, looking for things that we commonly miss in training. Are you making sure that it was effective? And so HAZCOM, do you have a written HAZCOM manual? That's something that's for the company to show to OSHA, right? I have a written HAZCOM manual. I'll pull it off a desk or there's a digital copy. Do you have labels and for containers and whatnot? Yeah, I could show you we got a label maker. Here are the labels that we use. And then you go, okay, well, let's go see if it's being followed, if it's actually effective. And you can go, that's where you go out and you have to go and look for little spray bottles and go, oh, this label's half missing and it's peeled off and it's faded. So there's a gap. That's a gap. We would see a break in continuity. That's also something a lot of folks miss with training programs is they think it's a check the box, it's a one and done, and it's not. Your safety management system should constantly be iterating on how we can tune this and make it more effective. But the other thing you mentioned with experience, like it's not just knowing the standard, but it's also experience. There is a part of the OSHA standard that requires a trainer to fit that definition, and that's with powered industrial trucks. Right? Mm-hmm. What does OSHA say about the trainer conducting the training?
Yeah, so PIT's powered industrial truck standard is one of the few standards out there within OSHA realm that does have some trainer requirements, and I think that's just, there's a lot of stuff within that standard as a whole that do get missed, but I think that's as vague as it is. I think it still is descriptive enough for you to get the gist of what they're getting at. But they tell you that you have to have the experience and the training to do that, right? And so, for example,
to be a trainer, right?
To be a trainer, yep.
Right.
And we do this a lot because there's only a handful of, like, for example, us, there's only a handful of trainer courses we teach that we think we can cover all the content, and that's one of them. But we go into, there's an interpretation letter out from OSHA where the person had asked OSHA, in the scenario being they're evaluating somebody operating a powered industrial truck with a specific XYZ attachment. And the scenario was, if I haven't operated that attachment as a trainer, I haven't operated it myself, more or less am I qualified to evaluate them? And in a nutshell, they're like, no, you're not. If you haven't evaluated that specific attachment. Now, if it's, you could teach the theory portion. So, for example, we did this at previous companies I worked at in the past where we had all these traveling millwrights and field service folks that were all across the country. So when I first started with them, I'd go around and when I'm visiting these job sites, I would work with our superintendents and foremen and project managers to help them be evaluators. And so what we would typically do is, we might even hop on a Zoom call after work, after they're on their shift day, and I would cover the theory portion, the classroom portion, formal instruction, as OSHA words it, by a Zoom call, and then they would have to go up with their foreman superintendent and do the hands-on evaluation. So they were more familiar with that. So if I wanted to cover, if all I was doing was just the classroom portion essentially and just a theory concept, then that's one thing. But like I said, that OSHA interpretation did say if you haven't done it yourself, how are you to say that they're doing it right or wrong?
Right. I mean, there are specialized, engineered, certified attachments that are very specific to some industries, and so that component can be often missed. So that's on the trainer side. But on the training side, what we're training, one of the common ones that I always come across is type of equipment. What is the requirement for the type of equipment? So you kind of touched on it with the attachments, but let's take the vehicle, the equipment itself, like a forklift, for example. There are types, right? What's the training say?
Yeah, so even with the PITs, there's kind of two different sections of the training content. There's a truck-related content, the PIT-related information about how does it steer, how does it, what's the types and classifications that you're using. And then there's the workplace-related topics. So where are you going to be using it? And that's another trap in itself. I think we made a post on it not too long ago on social media that a lot of companies get into is, I'll go send my employees out to some third party, usually like a rental place, forklift rental place. You think of whatever name you want to use, but send them out there to do a forklift operator training course, and then come back and we just say, okay, you're good. You went through, whatever ABC rental company, whatever it is. But they're not typically covering those workplace related topics, unless your workplace that you're working in is a gravel parking lot. That's usually what people do at these training places. They take you out back and let you operate a forklift and lift a couple skids and pallets and call it a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's on the forklift and the truck related topics and the workplace related topics. It does, like you mentioned, get into what kind of loads you're going to be handling. Being trained on the load manipulation and configuration, all that stuff. Like I said, a lot of times they'll just we'll lift this stack of pallets here, but realistically we're lifting maybe it's a 3,000 pound super stack of this chemical or a bunch of drums or whatever. Maybe it's wrapped and stretch wrapped and secure, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a bunch of pipes that are loose and bundled up. So there's a lot of things that are really site specific and really workplace specific. Not if you got different job sites you're going to, that trainers have to cover. Like we just talked about, they have to have that training experience to, be a qualified trainer per se. But do we know all those content and that we can confidently teach that?
Yeah.
Right. So, that's a topic that we talk about in a lot of our courses, and just to safety professionals in general is, if let's say we have an incident or a near miss. Well, if you look at 1910-178, what's the first, one of the first things you're supposed to do? You yank them off the forklift and to do some kind of investigation if there's a near miss, and then go through retraining.
Right.
Well, what do most companies do? They look at that. Okay, let's look at the training matrix. Okay, they were trained 6 months ago. Oh, they're good. But move on to the next topic. But we don't look and see, did that training actually cover what it was supposed to cover?
Yep.
Did the trainer actually cover it in a way that made sense? Are they confident enough to explain it, to a level that the operators are understanding? It's not just did we do the training, but you mentioned earlier, did we do effective training?
And right. What's changed since that training program was delivered? Yeah. Did we materially change something about our equipment or the way we handle and store and transport? So I love you covered two things: type of equipment, as well as site-specific conditions or the environment. Mm-hmm. The ones that I see a lot is the type of equipment. You just have a general forklift, warehouse forklift, and you put everybody through the forklift training, and then the maintenance crew's running a center rider, and maybe they're going outside on asphalt, and you never went out there. You never went down ramp. They're going down a ramp to the asphalt out the dock to unload parts, for replacing machine components because they're the maintenance crew, right? You didn't cover any of that stuff. They're going to be picking up with chains or slings versus pallets, and you never covered any of that stuff. Yeah, those are common things that we see folks missing, and so that's important.
Train them on like a warehouse, class 4, class 5, whatever, or class 1 electric. But then, like I said, next weekend they're out there operating a telehandler or something else. It's all in the PIP. It's all in the PIP realm, but it's a completely different ball game as far as operation side of things.
I think you should just ask yourself, what equipment do we have that falls under PIT? What types?
Yep.
Line them up. We got who's going to be operating them, or who could be operating multiple ones. You got to cover all of them. That's it. Just cover all of them. Another topic that we talked about, which is interesting, and people get passionate about some of these things in interpretation. So, look, it's in black and white. You can look it up.
Yeah.
HAZWOPER. Man, I mean, is it the 40 hour? Is it the tech? Is it the awareness? So let's just say in general, across the HAZWOPER spectrum, we were talking about this a couple weeks back, I think. The supervision part, like you could do the training. I don't care which part of the HAZWOPER, which level you're talking about. This example that I have, and you're going to bring up some others, I'm sure, but this is the supervised portion that's not in a classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen people miss this. They're like, hey, we're sending folks away to get the HAZWOPER training. I'm like, oh, the 40? No, this other level of training. And I'll look at the standard, and it says, well, you got to have, 24 hours or whatever it is, supervised of supervision, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, how are you doing that? And they're like, well, the manager knows. The manager will oversee that. Well, is the manager qualified? How do you document that it was done? Because OSHA's going to ask, and they're going to say, prove it. Well, they worked 5 shifts and how many hours each and so that's 20. And I was like, well, if it's a training requirement, shouldn't we document it?
Right. Yep.
So what are your thoughts on that? What do you see happening with HAZWOPER where folks commonly miss something?
I see a lot not happening more accurately. And to your point, and even within the discrepancy, or not really discrepancy, but just confusion. People would understand: do I need a 24-hour technician course, or do I need a 40-hour technician course? But with that, as you alluded to, there's got to be that field experience, right? So if I'm doing, the way they word it is general site worker. So if I'm more involved to a lot of different activities, then I have those 40 hours of initial training, but I have to have 3 days of supervised field experience. And, documentation, is one thing that's forgotten about. To our discussion, I don't think I've seen a lot of companies actually they'll leave it at the 40 hours initial, and they don't do all the direct supervised training after the fact. And if they do, they're probably not documenting it. Now, it's one thing, just, from you and I having similar backgrounds. If I'm at a fire department or some kind of, public response hazmat, team per se, we're going to document our runs and our responses to that, and we'll, get on-scene time and off-scene time, and when we were there, all those different things. When we went to rehab, or most of those things should be documented. So that's a little bit easier because they're going into their software program and dotting every I, crossing every T, and outlining the exact same thing. But in the industrial world, we're not doing a report for everything we do on a regular basis. So, when companies are doing that, when they're doing, like I said, if you have the general site workers to where they're getting that 40-hour initial and those 3 days of experience, or if you have somebody that has the 24-hour, usually the ones that are a little bit less exposed, a lot of times maybe it's an incidental response or so, they might get, if they meet that 24-hour requirement, they have 1 day, 8 hours of that. But what are we documenting is one, not just the time, but what did I do during that time? It's we can say we had, we were at this job site for 8 hours, but I could have just been sitting there with a meter the entire time doing nothing else but holding a meter and letting you know when it goes beep, beep, beep. Or was I actually out there doing things that are related to my task? Was I out there actually, was I involved in the selection of the PPE process? Was I involved in even the selection of the meters, or determining our response actions, and all those different things that we're not documenting? So it's more than just I was out there for X amount of time, and did we meet this, 1 day or 3 day of supervised? But also, more importantly, is what did I do in those 3 days? It's, the same concept when we're going out there and, we apply for a certification, right? It's, whether it's a credential for, a CSP or whatever it is, we say, here's how much experience we have. But 5 years for one person might not be the equivalency of 5 years for somebody else. I may have been exposed to a whole lot more. But the other key part of that is that you're getting that experience, whether that 1 day or 3 day supplemental training, and you're under the direct supervision of a trained, experienced supervisor. So they have their own requirements as well, just to be trained on supervisors per se. So in the direct is, I think it's one thing that a lot of topics, not just HAZWOP, but I've seen it in a lot of even electrical safety as well. Direct being key word, supervision of somebody's, essentially a qualified supervisor. That means they're right there with you. I'm not back at the office and then first thing in the morning and I say, hey, go out there and do this. You have any issues, give me a call. I'm out there with you. That way, if you do run into issues, I'm walking you through those steps and, teaching you things that if you have questions, whatever it may be.
Yeah. So I would say a great way to do this, I guess you could say close this gap that we've identified.
Yep.
In lack of documenting that this took place, or being able to explain how you can prove that took place, is for every work order to go clean something up, you have a start time, and you should document, how long that took, so that counts as time on doing that, performing that task, right? So you start chipping away at the total time that required to have somebody supervise you. But then you do have this after action meeting or report, this feedback of like, okay, these are the things, this is what we did, this is how it went, this is what I would like to see you do less of, more of, or something, some kind of documentation that shows that somebody had direct supervision, was managing the work, and then you have like a start and stop time. Like, I know people are going to roll their eyes, but if it says 24 hours total of direct supervision, how are you, what clock are you showing? Like, how can you tell that you've done it?
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. In the fire service, it's easy. You got run call. We know, they always know how long we were on scene and that's just baked into the industry and what we do. But if you're a service provider, that shouldn't be hard to be able to do, right? I would definitely flag that as a like it should go in your training file. So if I show up and there was an incident or there was any kind of question whether or not your individuals were trained, and I say, I want to see how much direct supervision they had post initial training, and you got to go to 4 other sources to cobble and to try to creatively piece together a timeline. It's like, well, here's an incident report where somebody ran into something with a forklift, and that I know Blaine helped clean that up. So I don't know, maybe it took an hour. It's like, that's not good. That's like, just make sure you have something in your training program to account for that piece, right?
Yeah, and we get also a discussion, for example, on the rescue side for, like, if we teach we call it a high angle rescue, but in the ANSI world they call it a fall protection. They have a competent rescuer and an authorized rescue. But either way, we're teaching, sometimes I call it rescue from heights training.
Yep.
If you go by the ANSI standard,
don't you? You do that often.
I actually just scheduled about 6 this morning. But if you go by the ANSI standard, which they're way more above and beyond OSHA on training requirements, because OSHA's, they don't talk about the rescue as far as training for rescuers per se, but they don't have any refresher requirements as far as like every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. ANSI says for every level, every 2 years, but also on the rescuer side, authorized and competent rescuer, they say to also have, in addition to the every 2 year training, to have an annual drill. Now they do give you a kind of a caveat, or I guess option B for that, is that if you have had a actual response, so let's say you actually did have one of the rescue team that can be used and documented in lieu of a standalone, just set time aside to do a rescue drill per se. So if you actually had to put the boots to the ground and do the job, then you can count that, but you still have to make sure, kind of on the same topic, we have to make sure, what did we actually do during that training? Did we still demonstrate all of our competencies that we needed to have? It might have been we did a rescue heights training, and we just went and grabbed a scissor lift and raised it up and brought them down the platform and lowered them that way. Real simple assisted rescue. Whereas your whole training that you've been trained on might involve ropes and nuts and all this technical stuff. Well, if all I did was use an aerial lift or a scissor lift to get somebody down, that's not going to check all the boxes on me demonstrating my competency every year still. So I might still have to do, in addition to that, still supplement that with some more hands-on stuff out there. But either way, it does, like I said, if you actually do have to put it down, and I think it's a good thing that you mentioned, like that, the after-action report, just hot wash, debrief. Let's look and see how we did. What do we need to fix next time? What did we do good? What can we work on? There's always room for improvement.
Man, you do a meeting like that and document it. Start time, stop time, feedback, improvements, corrective actions. We decided we want to buy these other pieces of equipment. This, they're gonna allow us to do more stuff or whatever. Like, who's gonna argue with that? That's some documentation right there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you mentioned ANSI had that caveat about if you've had events, right? But if the events didn't involve the other equipment, you still got to supplement somehow practical with that equipment. What about fire drills? I've had somebody ask me this, so let's hear. I'm kind of throwing this out. That's another reason why I love our conversations that are rarely ever scripted. We'll have a general topic and then we'll just talk. I had somebody call me. This was many years ago, and they said they had a pot that they would heat a material in. It overheated. It didn't catch fire. It just produced some smoke, and it set the fire alarm off. And we evacuated. We did all of our things. Turned out to be nothing, and everybody went back in. Hey, can we use that as our evacuation drill? What are your thoughts on that one? I know it's a different standard. It's not the rescue. This is fire. This is your fire or emergency evacuation drill. But
yeah, it can get a little tricky on that if you do use that. And so, if you think of the aspect of a typical fire drill, it's planned out. Whether we announce it or unannounce it, that's up to the employer. But even if it's unannounced, there's still going to be obviously people that do know about it, because for the purpose of supervising and evaluating as we go through there, you may designate as fire wardens or emergency coordinators, whatever it is. But during a typical, planned, unannounced fire drill, we've got people stationed, or should have people stationed, let's just say, around to help, one, make sure it's all going as well as proper as we want to, but also, two, they're taking mental notes and or physical notes of, okay, so we watch such and such go back and get their purse out of their locker, or some employee A was over there still wanting to finish up this job on this lathe or whatever while it's going on. OSHA doesn't come out and flat out say you got to do fire drills. Now, I've seen a lot of insurance companies that have that requirement as far as like a building insurance and liability insurance. They will want that, so that may be a insurance requirement you have to do, and or if you have a state OSHA plan. But if we use that actual scenario, hey, we activated the fire alarm, we evacuated. One, did we have a way of evaluating, during that process? Because maybe we just all scattered and ran at that point. But two, who did it affect? If it was only affecting one part of your building and only one part evacuated, we're not going to say that covers the rest, all the other employees that we'd have to evaluate as well. If it only covered 10% of it, how do we know the other 90% actually would fall under that? But yeah, even those we always have an after action report. And I always tell people, the people at the chemical plant I used to work at in Indiana, they always hated it when I did fire drills, but after the first couple of times, they realized, like, yeah, it makes sense. And I said, I'm not going to do a fire drill. It's not going to be sunny and 75 degrees outside. I can promise you that. I said, it's going to be snowing, it's going to be raining something, it's going to be cold outside, because I want to see realistically who's going to stop and grab their coat, whatever it is. I said, because in the real scenario, I said, if we plan these things out and you go out there and we do have heaven forbid, we do have an actual fire, you're going to evacuate, we're going to account for everybody, and then, we lived out in Indiana, I was on southern Indiana across from Louisville. I said, we're going to get a target bus, or we're going to send you to a neighboring, once we get accountability, we're going to send you to a neighboring facility to where you're out of the rain, out of the elements. I said, it's not like you're going to be standing out here all day. Right. I said, so we want to plan for those things, worst case scenarios, and we'll once we get all our I's, cross our T's on, accountability, we're going to send you somewhere else.
Yeah, and this one isn't so much a training gap, a training miss, but maybe in a program. And I see that one a lot with emergency evacuation plans, written plans.
Yep.
Is you don't have a secondary muster protocol, meaning we get everybody out safely. That's the main goal. Get everybody out of the building safely. It's on fire, right? Once you account for everybody, it's 12 degrees. Sleet's coming in sideways, or you have shelter in place because it's a tornado, and then it's cleared, but there's damage to the building. So now we have to initiate an evacuation. So you're running a shelter in place, and you're dumping the building right after. So you're running two scenarios, but you get outside, it's still lightning and raining and everything. Do you have a secondary evacuation point? You could have damaged vehicles. People don't have their keys. They can't get into their cars. They didn't grab their keys. So I've had some companies say, oh, yeah, we just tell them they can go in their cars. And I'm like, yeah, but you tell them not to grab purses and bags. And
yeah,
they're not all going to have. Who do you have that's a neighbor? What if you're rural and you don't have any? So, yeah, that whole we're going to be out for 3 hours and it's 12 degrees and nobody grabbed coats. We're going to have a problem. Yeah. That's a common miss that folks have in their written plan and in their drill. They drill and then they come right back in. So it's easy to miss that second component of, okay, we've got everybody out. Now we have to keep them safe. We got to get them somewhere else because it's not safe to be out here.
Yeah. Or in a similar concept to that, so not only, the secondary muster point, assembly points, but also one that I've seen even outside the consulting world, I've seen a lot of companies do, or kind of get in the trap of, they train people that assembly point A is your only option.
Yeah.
I've got 15 different assembly points. I've got a 700,000 square foot facility with 15 different assembly points. And you think you've been told that is assembly point A is your only point. So I've seen people literally go back through the building to get to the one on the front side when there was one 10 feet outside the back door right next to them. So, evaluating your feasible options. But if you do that, obviously you have to have a reliable way of communication and say, hey, we have XYZ employees back at our spot. We know they're supposed to go to yours to make sure we're on the same page for communication accountability. But, I've seen a lot of companies just get in that trap of, the operations has to go here, maintenance has to go here. But what happens if operations is up in the front office asking purchasing something, and then it happens? Are they supposed to go back through the building to go to the back exit when they can just go out the front door with the office workers?
I saw somebody, they blew out their knee. They ended up going, it was a recordable, and it was during a drill. Because they were the machine operators toward the back of the facility, and the rule was when you go out, everybody has to meet in the front parking lot for accountability, for head count. So everybody that dumped out of the back, and so at the same time, right, you just don't ask. You go out your nearest safe exit. If you don't see smoke and it's not blocked, and that's your closest exit, you go out that door. Well, then they went out the back, and then they had this little landing pad, this little concrete pad out this back door that was maybe 4 feet by 6 feet concrete pad. Then it was all grass. And this was in the winter. And they were trying to get through the back, up the side of the building, which wasn't maintained. It was, again, grass, didn't have a pavement, didn't have walkway, and this person stepped in a gopher hole or something and just twisted their knee and just was out. And so they were trying to get to the front because this is also something I don't like, and that is they were timing them. And I'm like, what are you timing them for? Just get out of the building.
Yeah.
Get out safely is the goal. You're now timing how fast it takes for them to get to the front muster point. So some of them were running. And I'm like, what are you running for?
Right.
Yeah, it was. Unless you're in danger, it's hard to say not to run. But you remember this from the firefighter days, man. A captain told me, if you're running, we're all going to start following you and ask questions later. So you don't run on a scene, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So that was
yeah.
They're timing them. They were timing them. It blew my mind that they were like, "Hey, we shaved 12 seconds off our last," and I'm like, "Oh, you're asking for it."
Yeah. It always makes me think of, and I'll talk about this with several people, especially like we teach an emergency action plan class or something, is we had a apartment fire that we had responded to, and this is a 3-level apartment, and the stairwells were in the middle, so you had like 4 or I guess 12 units on one side, and you had an external stairwell in the middle covered by the roof, but external, then you had other units. Well, we were in the back bottom right, room doing a search, and that stairwell had collapsed.
Ooh.
Well, this guy firefighters, we were a combination department, so we had full-time and volunteers, and one of the volunteers, he was fairly new, didn't have a whole lot of experience. Well, he thought that we were just under that. When realistically, we went out the backside. I said, we had option 2, exit B. We went out the backside when that did that. Well, he's ready to deploy a RIT and just have this big giant thing. He's screaming over the radio. And we're like, no, there's more than one exit here. We just went out the backside.
Wow. Luckily, though, that's what comms are for, right? Radios. Get confirmation. But, good stuff. Man, we started with training. We kind of stuck with it, though. With it. Common things that we miss, easy things that we miss that could result in a couple of things, not just compliance issues, but having folks out there that are less than qualified for certain situations. And we obviously don't want that. So.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, man. So talk to us about where folks can find out more about what you do. I know you've been a huge supporter of the podcast over the years, and we always chat. But for those that are just hearing Drew for the first time, give us the rundown. What is it, man? What are you into? What do you do?
Yeah, so I think you mentioned earlier on, aerosafetyus.com is our website, but we're based out of Kentucky. We travel all across the U.S., but feel free to check us out on social media, LinkedIn, Facebooks, and now we stay fairly active on TikTok as well. But anything from the training aspect to the admin, just got done quoting out a kind of a mock OSHA audit out there, but we try to share not just what we're doing, but also try to share information like this and beneficial information, not just for us. Like I said, we're not just saying, hey, here's what we're doing in training, but also try to just share information on, hey, did you know this OSHA interpretation out there is this, or just a general Q&A, can I actually do this at an employer? And then we run through the answer on this. So feel free to, give us a follow, and, hopefully you'll pick up a few tidbits of information. And of course, by all means, follow the locals community. So we're always sharing some good information there, and got a lot of great safety pros over there.
Oh, yeah, the SafetyPro Podcast community site. Obviously, you're very active there as well. And, anybody, I tell anybody, it's not just that we mention it at every episode and online. I tell anybody that's looking for safety training, consulting, services of that nature, that Aero Safety is the official safety services provider of the SafetyPro Podcast. So always reach out to Aero Safety for your safety services needs. Again, that's aerosafetyus.com. Thanks again, Drew. I appreciate your insight. Yeah, and stay safe out there, and we'll talk next time.
Take care. Have a good one.